Hello everybody, this is Dr. Holcomb again. This video is based on Chapter 1 from the Carolina Rhetoric called Practicing Rhetoric. If you haven't read that chapter, go ahead and stop this video and go read it and come back when you have read it. If you have read it, well, what we're going to do today is talk about or address the question, what is rhetoric? Now, this seems a simply formulated question, but the answer to that question is rather complex. In fact, we're going to devote a good chunk of the semester towards answering that question, what is rhetoric? But today I thought I would give you an overview of some of the major topics and issues. More specifically, we're going to be covering 3 topics. First, definitions of rhetoric. Second, modes of persuasion. And then third, reasons for studying rhetoric. So let's begin with definitions of rhetoric. More specifically, let's begin with how rhetoric is often used in the popular media, or how it's conceptualized in the popular imagination. There, rhetoric is often seen as a negative thing, a bad thing, such as empty speech, a verbal smokescreen, just a bunch of verbiage a politician throws up to conceal or distract from more nefarious activities or thoughts. Or it's seen as lies and invasions, or ornate or flowery language. Rhetoric can be any one of these things. In fact, that's one of the things we need to be on our guard against, is when people are using rhetoric for nefarious purposes. But rhetoric can also be used in the service of good, productive interaction. To try to get at the better side of rhetoric, let's look at several more academic definitions. And we're going to take those definitions both from the ancient and modern world. Let's begin with the ancient, particularly Plato and Aristotle. Now, you read in Chapter 1, there was a little insert called We Are All Greeks, where they talked about the origins of rhetoric and the importance of rhetoric in Greek culture. There you read about how rhetoric emerged in the context of a democracy, and a direct democracy, where the citizens had direct participation in legal and political disputes or issues. There were no professional lawyers, there were no professional politicians in ancient Greece. If you wanted to see a particular law passed, you had to show up at the General Assembly, stand up, and make a speech in its favor. Or if you didn't want the law passed, against it. Or if you were another citizen sued you for something, like your sheep wandered onto his property or something, then you would have to show up in court. You couldn't go out and hire a lawyer. You would have to show up in court and speak in your own defense. In such a context, rhetoric becomes incredibly important. Or how about this? An ability to use rhetoric effectively becomes incredibly important. So let's look at these 2 definitions. The first one is from Plato, a rather fanciful definition, at least to our ears. He defines it as enchanting men's souls. Several interesting things about this definition. One is that it focuses on the effect of rhetoric. What are its consequences? It enchants the souls of its audience. The other interesting thing is the word enchant. It seems sort of a strange word to use when thinking about rhetoric, but in the ancient world, the distance between rhetoric and magic wasn't as far as it is in our day. Think about it. What does a wizard do? A wizard casts a spell, utters words, utters an incantation, and in doing so, he or she brings the sort of target of the spell under his or her control in some way. So in the ancient world, it wasn't unusual to find people comparing rhetoric or the power of rhetoric to the power of magic, where words bewitch an audience. Aristotle, his definition is much more sort of objective or neutral. In fact, it's one that we probably wouldn't be surprised to find in a modern textbook on rhetoric. He defines rhetoric as the faculty of discovering, in a given situation, the available means of persuasion. What's in contrast to Plato's definition, where he's focused on the effects of rhetoric, Aristotle's focused on the invention process itself. It's a capacity in ourselves or in the orator to find the available means of persuasion, and to do so in such a way that it meets the requirements of a particular situation. We're going to come back to Aristotle in a few moments when we talk about the modes of persuasion. Let's move on to a modern definition. Now, this is one that I have cobbled together from a number of definitions that are in circulation in the modern academic discourse on rhetoric. Let me read it to you. Rhetoric is the study and practice of people using language or other symbols in specific situations to modify the beliefs and actions of an audience. Now, take a minute, read through this again, and think about what are the crucial and important words. Do you have a couple in mind? For me, it's packed of important words. The first two occur right at the beginning, the study and practice. Now, what do I mean by that? That rhetoric is something that we can observe, analyze. Think of, say President Obama makes a speech. We can get a transcript of that speech, and we can look at it with a critical eye to see how it was put together, what strategies were used, how it was designed to achieve its particular effect. By practice, and the book touches on this as well, rhetoric is something that we do. We do it all the time, and we're probably not even aware of how often we do it. And we're not just talking about a formal speech or a formal piece of written prose. In your everyday action, your everyday interactions with your friends, you're engaging in rhetoric. You're trying to modify their beliefs or actions. The next key word is language. That's going to be our primary focus, primarily written language this semester. But I also wanted to acknowledge that rhetoric can operate through other symbol systems. That's the whole parenthetical there. That other symbols have rhetorical import. Think of clothing, how you dress in particular ways to communicate particular meanings about yourself, or about your goals, or about your ambitions, or about your capacities or abilities. Or think about, hair, how you style your hair. That's a symbol system that has rhetorical import. Or music. The music that you listen to communicates information about yourself. Or even food. Food has can convey a rhetorical message. Think of a cooking show like Chopped, where one of the criteria a dish is evaluated on is a presentation. That the presentation radiates meaning. Maybe that something was put together with care or with a degree of sophistication. So anytime something can communicate some meaning, then it has rhetorical capacity or possibilities. The next key words are specific situations. That if rhetoric is a practice, it's a practice that happens in concrete settings. And those concrete settings can both shape a rhetorical message, and reciprocally we try to formulate a rhetorical messages so that they shape the situations in which they occur. The next key words are modify the beliefs and actions. Actually, I would say beliefs or actions, because you can do one without the other. By beliefs, I'm trying to capture the possibility that all you're after is intellectual consent. You're trying to convince somebody that something is the case, and you're not really interested in them acting beyond that. In other instances, your goal is to modify their actions, to get your listeners to do something or your readers to do something. I guess a paradigmatic case is when a politician gives a speech on the eve of an election night he or she is trying to modify modify the actions of his or her listeners to get them to vote in a particular way. Or think of a more ordinary situation, one in which you are, I don't know, asking somebody out to the movies, and you're kind of going in your head, you're trying to craft a message. You're trying to craft a message so that it maximizes the possibility that the recipient of that message will go to the movies with you, will take that action. And then finally, audience. That's just a reminder that rhetoric is always addressed. It always has an audience that receives it. And like a situation, that audience is something that can shape a rhetorical message, or another way of saying it is sometimes we tailor our rhetorical message so that it accommodates an audience. But reciprocally, we're also trying to shape that audience in a particular way. That is, to modify their beliefs or actions. Again, to give you an example, think about, writing a letter home to your mom versus writing a letter home to your best friend. The nature of your message is going to vary according to audience. You're going to tell your mom certain things, and you can tell your friends certain things, and there might not be overlap between the two. Okay, let's move on to the next topic, which is modes of persuasion. Now, this goes back to Aristotle. Remember the faculty of discovering in a given situation the available means of persuasion. Well, these are means of persuasion. There are three that Aristotle lays out: ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos refers to the credibility or character of the speaker. Pathos refers to the emotions of an audience, and logos refers to reasoning or logic, hence logos. What Aristotle is doing here is offering a crude model of human motivation. That is, he's trying to think about what it is that gets people to do what they do. They might do something because a credible speaker tells them to do it. That is ethos. Or they do something because their emotions lead them to do something or to believe something. That's pathos. Or they do something after applying their rational faculty and reasoning, or seeing somebody else reason through an issue. That's another motive for belief or action. And that's another way of thinking about rhetoric, that we can think about rhetoric as another way of defining rhetoric as tapping human motivation through language. Floating all around there, you'll see the word kairos. Now, kairos is sort of an ever-present ingredient of rhetoric. And what it means is timeliness or opportune time. Think of a joke that to deliver a joke successfully, you've got to get the timing right, not only in the actual delivery of pacing of the joke, but also its placement in an ongoing conversation. You can't, something happens and then 5 minutes later you think of the perfect comeback. You can't walk back over to your friend or your adversary and say, hey, and you smell too, or whatever. I mean, that kairotic moment has already passed. So these are the modes of persuasion. We're going to talk about these more. In fact, there'll likely be a video on each of these in the coming weeks. I see them at 14:11. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this particular video and pick up the rest of it in part 2. Stay tuned.